Welcome. Today's NEASC webinar is Moving Forward, Empower Educators and Support Students by Leveraging the Science of Purposeful Belonging. For the next 60 minutes, we'll be joined by educators, over 250 educators from around the world. The chat will be open if you'd like to take a second right now to welcome your fellow educators. Say hello from your location, your name, your school that you're at. And the chat will be open throughout the presentation today. Also, the question and answer, if you want to put questions into the chat. Our presenters this morning are Tim Klein and Eric Frenette. I'm going to jump right into the introduction so we can move right into our topic today. Tim Klein is an award-winning urban educator, clinical therapist, school counselor, and lead for the True North Project at Boston College. He's worked intensively with marginalized students to empower them to pursue meaningful and fulfilling lives. He previously served as the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Project Wayfinder, an organization that designs and disseminates purpose education for secondary schools. He's been a teaching fellow at Harvard University and the Director of School and Community Engagement at Medford High School. At Medford High School, he implemented strategies that increased college matriculation by 30%. Before that, he spent 5 years as the outreach director for Summer Search, a national youth development nonprofit serving historically underrepresented student populations. His work has been featured in EdSurge, Greater Good Magazine, and the Los Angeles Times. He has spoken widely with Dr. Bell Liang, professor of counseling, development, and educational psychology at the Lynch School of Education and Human Development at Boston College. Last year, together, they published How to Navigate Life. Eric Frenette is a Connecticut licensed professional counselor and nationally certified counselor. He holds a master's in school counseling from the University of Connecticut. He worked for 6 years as a secondary school counselor. Eric has a master's certificate in Catholic school leadership and since 2015 has been the principal of St. Joseph's School in Bristol, Connecticut, his alma mater. In addition to his role as head of school, he serves as part-time assistant superintendent for the Archdiocese of Hartford's Catholic Schools. So welcome to Tim, welcome to Eric. And I want to just open this up. Tim, you can take this wherever you want to go, but talk about the purpose of belonging. And then we'll circle back to how the purpose of belonging can empower educators and how the purpose of belonging can empower and support students.
Yeah, and so we're going to get into purpose. So I will focus just now on belonging and what it is. And so belonging is very, very simple. It's feeling that you are part of a community that cares about you and that you care about as well, as being part of a community that you feel like you are uniquely contributing to. And I think a big part of feeling a sense of belonging is this feeling of psychological safety within that community, knowing that people trust your intentions, they know who you are as a person, and when you talk, act, behave, they're going to assume the best of intentions in there. And it's that sense of belonging that you need to do the work that we're going to dive into about how to cultivate belonging. Would you add anything on that, Eric, before we dive in? Or
no, I think you described it perfectly. I think, to belong, you need to understand yourself and what you're a part of and how you contribute to that. So having that time to really reflect and to know how all those pieces fit together is a key component for that sense of belonging that feeds right into purpose.
Great. So I'm going to share my screen. I hope everyone can see that. And I think too, so we're going to dive into purpose and belonging. And the best and worst part about both of these concepts is that they're so abstract. They can feel so high in the clouds. What makes that great is we have an incredible diverse array of educators from all over the world. Like, I am so inspired by everyone coming from all over the world here. That really speaks to the universal need and theme that is purpose and belonging. So we're going to start today. We're going to start with telling my story about how I came to understand purpose and belonging, but that's going to show you what the cutting edge research is and how it's the key ingredient to help everyone thrive in school, work, and life. We're going to give you a chance. I know this is a webinar, but we're going to give you a chance to create space for you to actually apply this research firsthand so you can internalize it and see how it applies to your school and your students. And then we're going to walk away with action steps and tools that you can be doing directly after this webinar, to be using cultivating purpose belonging in your school right away. So I'm going to start with my story. And then when we go into the practicals, we're going to bring Eric more in to show that how he is embodying purpose and belonging in his role. So, what's my story? So Dan did a great job of saying, you know, I'm a clinical therapist. I'm a social worker. I graduated from the University of Chicago. I was a teaching fellow at the Graduate School of Education at Harvard. So I was training future educators and school leaders on how to transition into their role with purpose and belonging. I helped launch an SEL program out of Stanford University that's now serving hundreds of thousands of students all over the country and world. And now I teach at Boston College in the Purpose Lab. So this is all I'm not putting this up here to show all these fancy titles and all these credentials, but I'm putting this up here to show that this actually isn't my story. And so I actually want to show you where my story actually begins, because it didn't start at these places. So my story actually begins right here. And so this is a picture of me in high school. Not only is this a picture of me in high school being ridiculous, eating grapes with my shirt off, this is my senior yearbook photo. So when I was graduating from high school, this is how I decided to present myself to the world. And this embodies who I thought I was. This was the story I was telling myself. I was incredibly loud. I was just trying to have fun at all times. I was never taking myself seriously. And this really actually got embodied my senior year of high school. I'm in Vermont, and we're in this class with the teacher that everyone loves. She's the drama teacher. She does the school plays. Everyone loves her. She's going around to all the different students, asking them where they're going to go to college next year. I'm in this class with all of my classmates. She gets to her favorite student, who's the lead actor in her play. She loves this student, and she asks him, Ben, where are you going to school? And I can say the name of the college now because it doesn't exist anymore. And he said, I'm going to Johnson State College. And she takes a minute, she looks at Ben, and she says in front of the entire class, why are you going there? A bunch of Tim Kleins go there. Meaning she was disappointed in him going to this school because he was this very thoughtful, kind, creative student. And at Johnson State, it was a bunch of loud, obnoxious students like Tim Klein. And I'm telling you the story because she wasn't wrong. That is the person that I was. It turns out I had undiagnosed ADHD that I didn't even know I had. That was causing a lot of my behaviors. But it was that was a moment for me it was what I call an inflection point, because I had to make a decision about what does that mean for me when I hear something like that? What does this mean about who I am as a person? What does it mean for my story? And I can either, is she right? Is this the type of person I am, or am I someone different? Well, I decide when I go off to college that Joanna is not going to tell, that teacher is not going to tell me who I am, but if people think that I'm a loud, obnoxious jerk, well, I'm going to decide to be one. So I go to college, I go to Ithaca College, I join their tennis team. We win the conference championship in my freshman year. We set a school record for wins. I immediately quit because it's getting in the way of my partying, just to be perfectly honest with you. Throughout my whole college experience, I don't do anything in college of meaning except my senior year of college, where I decide to run for student government president. And I just run because I see an opportunity to win, but I run as the same person as I was. And so here is a picture of me as the student government president. And the name of our party was called The Party. Tim Helps Everyone Party. I ran on a candidacy of who would you rather drink a beer with. I'm not proud of this at all, but this is who I was as a person. Now, I will say the smartest thing I ever did was those people behind me were incredibly talented, innovative people. So all the way on the right, you have Nivi Mukherjee, who right now runs one of the most innovative edtech startups in Kenya. Next to her is Lane Tobias, who does criminal justice reform in New York City. So I had these amazing people behind us. And so at the end of the year, the school paper runs this story on how surprisingly our student government our student government body was the most effective they've ever had. Here's the headline of that article about how well we did. The headline says, "No joke." Now, why would they run an article about saying no joke about a very successful student government association? Because my story to the world was I was still a joke. I treated myself as a joke. I thought the world was a joke. And this is the story I was telling myself. Now, all of this changes. I go off and I graduate. I go to University of Chicago, and I'm lucky enough, I decide to volunteer at a Boys and Girls Club on the south side of Chicago, and the Daniel A. Cotter Club. And I'm coming from Vermont, and I go and I work at this Boys and Girls Club just because I've always liked kids. And I'm this kid from Vermont. If people don't know, Vermont is one of the whitest states in the United States. It's 98% white. I'm going to a predominantly African-American community where I'm one of the only white people there. And it was at that point, seeing this, when I was working with these students in Chicago at the time, 185 Chicago public high school students had got shot in that year alone. And so when I was a high school student, I didn't want to go to school because I just wanted to have fun. My students that I were working with, they didn't want to go to school because they were afraid for their safety to go to school. And I'm ashamed to say this, but it was at this moment as a 22-year-old where working with these students is when I realized life is not a joke. That there are students going through I have all of this privilege in the world that affords me to treat it as a joke. These students did not. And this really encapsulated when I met this student, Crystal Lewis. So the Boys and Girls Club have this thing called the Youth of the Year competition, where students they come up and they tell their story about what the Boys and Girls Club did to them. And I had the privilege of working with Crystal and hearing her story. And Crystal told me a story she had never told anyone else. She told a story of domestic violence. She told a story of all of these challenges that she had been facing in her life that she had been overcoming. Crystal had this amazing story, but more so, she had this amazing dream to become a chef. So she does the Boys and Girls. She wins the Chicago Youth of the Year competition. She wins the Illinois Youth of the Year competition. She wins the Mid-East Youth of the Year competition. She gets a scholarship to go on to the CIA Culinary Institute of America. And it was at this point that I realized that these were the type of students that I wanted to work with. From there, I go and work at Summer Search, which is a nonprofit youth development organization that works with low-income first-gen youth. And what we do with these students is we give them full scholarships to go on backpacking and wilderness trips, climbing mountains, canoeing. They're doing 3-week trips in the summer where they're out in the wilderness without electricity, without a phone, for 3 weeks going to push themselves. And so students in our program, we didn't do any academic tutoring. We didn't do any academics at all, but our students were graduating college at 5 times the rate of their low-income first-generation peers. And what I realized is I was meeting a lot of crystals. All the students I was working with had these amazing stories about who they were, what they were trying to accomplish, what they wanted to do in life. And they had this conviction that if they went to college, they could achieve dreams where they could have a positive impact on their families. And so it was at this point forward that I realized that I just became obsessed with understanding the stories students are telling themselves about who they are, how the world works, and what they think of the future. At this point, I decided to go and work at Medford High School because I wanted to go work with students who didn't know what their story was yet. All the students who were coming into Summer Search already knew their story. They were very driven. They were very motivated. I wanted to work with students who were like me, who would never have joined this program. And so I'm working at Medford High School as a school counselor. And what I'm doing is anytime a student walks into my office, they're coming in, they're being like, I want to change my course. I need a work permit. And I'm asking them, what's your story? What do you hope to do in the future? What are your biggest aspirations? Every single student who comes into my room, I'm asking them stories about who they are as a person. Turns out at the time that at my school, Boston College and Harvard are doing a longitudinal study about purpose and mentoring. And so this is Dr. Belle Liang, who is one of the leading experts on purpose and mentoring in the world, who is the lead investigator on this research. She's going into this high school asking students what adult genuinely cares about who you are as a person? What adult is asking you questions about your life, asking you questions about your future and in your past? And I'd only been at the school for 4 months, but my students kept saying, Mr. Klein, Mr. Klein, Mr. Klein. And it's not that I was doing anything special. It just so happens that I was prioritizing creating space for students to explore their own stories. In a school, as we all know, we're educators here, there's not a lot of space to do that. When I read about Belle's research, I had never heard about purpose before, but when I saw the research she was doing, it was a light bulb moment for me, because her research was putting words to what I had been feeling throughout my 10-year career working with students. And her work was around the science of purpose. And so what purpose is, it's living a life that's personally meaningful with an intention to contribute to the world beyond the self. Put more simply, it's having some sort of future goal that feels personally meaningful to you, and you feel like pursuing that goal will have a positive impact on one person or your family or your community. If you genuinely think what you're pursuing is not only personally fulfilling to you, but will also contribute to the world, that's a sense of purpose. And it turns out when students have a sense of purpose, they have a goal that's personally meaningful, and they feel like it's genuinely going to impact others, and it's school dependent, meaning they can see how doing well in school can serve as a stepping stone to reaching that goal. The research shows amazing things happen. So students and educators with a sense of purpose have increased well-being, reduced impact of psychological stress, lower levels of depression and anxiety. I want to be clear here. The research actually shows that people with a sense of purpose have more stressors in their life than people without a sense of purpose. The biggest criticism of the purpose research, well, is purpose a privilege for people who don't have to deal with real world issues or worried about keeping the lights on or paying the bills? It turns out that people with more stress tend to have a higher sense of purpose. Now, what's interesting about this is that the research shows that purpose serves as a protective barrier against the negative impacts of stress. So you all are here working in a very tumultuous time in education. You have very stressful jobs. But if you feel a sense of purpose in what you do, purpose changes your relationship with that stress. Instead of stress being like this incredibly toxic negative thing that's only harming me, people with a sense of purpose see stress as giving you the necessary energy you need to pursue that noble goal that you have. Of course, there's a level where you can get overworked and there's too much stress where it's not helpful, but people with a sense of purpose, they are protected against a lot of the negative effects of that stress. It also leads to increased physical health. People with a sense of purpose get sick less, live longer, are less likely to die. There's actually research showing that they did research with people who had third-degree burns all over their body. And they asked those people, why is it important for you to get better, to get healthy, to get out of the hospital? The people who had a purposeful reason to get better were generating white T blood cells at higher levels than people who didn't have a sense of purpose. Sense of purpose was having a physiological impact on their body that made their physical body healthier. And then, of course, as well, the research shows students with a sense of purpose are more self-directed, they're more engaged, they have better relationships with their peers and their teachers, they're more likely to graduate from high school, more likely to graduate from college. They're 10 times more likely to be thriving in their careers than people who don't have a sense of purpose. So purpose, when done right, it is positively correlated with every indicator of well-being and success that you can almost think of. And it's not only for students. So that's it, it's also for educators as well. Educators with a sense of purpose, lower levels of burnout, higher retention in their schools, on and on and on. And so in our research, we know purpose when we see it. Each one of you has worked with a purposeful student. Think about the student that you're never going to forget for the rest of your life. That student who, no matter what challenge life threw at them, they were incredibly resilient. They somehow would overcome all obstacles. They kept going. That student had a sense of purpose. But we also know we've worked with many more students who had all the potential in the world. And no matter how much you tried, you could never get the light bulb to switch on. You could never get them to see how to get that purpose connected to their school. And so the research shows that there wasn't a lot of evidence-based practices to cultivate purpose. I saw that as an opportunity. So Dr. Bell-Yang and I, we partnered together and we created an evidence-based program at my school called Empower, where we got to work. And so we built this program using all the evidence-based strategies we could to say, can we cultivate a sense of purpose in students? And this is the class that I taught. There was no attendance requirements. I didn't give any grades. I didn't give any homework. I just created space for students to explore their own purpose. And I had students who were absent all the time, and they would tell me, I came to school today. I knew it was a Friday. I knew we had to Empower. It's the only reason I came to school, because this was a space for them to be connecting with their peers. We did studies on it, and our research found, we did a randomized controlled trial. We did qualitative studies. Students who went through our program, higher levels of purpose, got better, higher GPA, 30% more likely to graduate and go to college as a result than peers who didn't do the program. So we took that, and then I'm actually going to go through because I already said that. And we wrote this book where we synthesize all the research, all the best practices, and we put it into the book that Belle and I wrote called How to Navigate Life. And it's really for educators who are trying to help students navigate life. And so our book is about using purpose as a decision-making framework to help people navigate life. Now, and in that, we have these 4 elements of purpose that I won't go into now, but you would see this in the book. And so what I want to do is talk about, but what is purpose really? I gave the scientific, yes, it's a stable and generalized aspiration that's personally meaningful, but what is purpose really in everyday talk? Well, what purpose is a story. That's what purpose is. And not only is it a story, it's a story that connects the past, present, and future in a meaningful and fulfilling way. And so people with a sense of purpose, they're telling themselves and other stories. They're making sense of their lives by using story, and those stories are leading to a sense of purpose. And so let's practice, let's test it out for ourselves right now. This is not a quiz. You're not getting graded on it, but I am going to ask you an incredibly important question that I want you to take a second to really think about. And it's, why are you an educator, right? Why are you here at this NEASC webinar? Why are you in the role? Why are you doing the work that you are doing? And I want you to explore that as a second. But what I'd like to do while you are thinking about it is bring in Eric and actually ask Eric this question. So why are you an educator, Eric?
Right. And that's a good question. I mean, that's a question that has so many different answers based on when I would have been asked that question. So right now, as principal of a Catholic school and assistant superintendent for the Archdiocese of Hartford, if you had told me 10 years ago that that's where I would be, I would say you're crazy. But looking back, I had always had an interest in working in a school. I remember back in high school, I wanted to be a history teacher. And going to college and really kind of trying to figure things out. I stumbled upon psychology and I really liked psychology. And going back to what you were saying, Tim, like kind of that sense of purpose, what was driving me early on had always been a very reactive way of living. Like, I need a job that's going to pay me money so I can buy a house and have clothes and eat, like the basic requirements. I remember being a kid, always like, my mom would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said I wanted to have an office with a briefcase, because that was just from like cartoons what you thought a stable job was. Right. So as I explored, in college, different options, I found psychology, and I had an interest in that, and found how could this connect to schools, and that's where I found school counseling. So I remember very actively taking time, and Tim and I, we talk about this all the time, this purposeful reflection, taking time to really think. And I live in my head. So I'm always thinking, about, this thing or that thing and how they connect. So I really thought out, like, how would I be able to work in schools through psychology? I found school counseling. And then that became my new focus, my new purpose, if you will, was to be a school counselor. As I was going to my master's for that, I realized UConn, at the program I was at, you could also become a licensed professional counselor over a series of time. So I'm like, oh, now, I can work in schools, but also maybe expand this role to a deeper level. And again, thinking like, why would I want to do that? Well, what are my goals? I remember at one point, and this goes to the idea of like core values and what drives you. Talking about industrial organizational psychology, which anyone knows what that is. It's working in a corporate environment with psychology. And it's actually funny. I think back now and I kind of chuckle, but I remember being in my poli-sci class, learning about the Communist Manifesto, and being like, I can't work for the corporate world. If the proletariat's gonna revolt, I have to have something that helps people. That's what I really want to do, is help people. And that kind of shifted my focus now to more counseling. And it's been one thing after another where you kind of go down one path and it leads to 6 more. And then again, having that kind of reflective practice of looking, okay, well, where do I want to go with this? Which then led me to getting a school counseling job, the job I always wanted. I made it, right? If you read Tim's book, the performance mindset, I had finally achieved the goal that I had set out to achieve, but I wasn't happy. I was still missing something. There was still something lacking. And it took me 6 years. As long as I worked as a school counselor, it took me 6 years to really figure it out. And I was missing a deeper component, like a deeper satisfaction to what I was doing. At the time, I had kind of become reacquainted with my faith. I was raised Catholic, but kind of had like a lapse in that. And realized, that was a big part of who I was. And I was given the opportunity very randomly to apply for the principal position at my old grade school. And again, I said, you're crazy. I'm not going to do that. I made it. I got the job I always wanted. I'm comfortable. I'm helping people, but there was that piece that was missing. And I didn't realize it until I was offered the job that I could now combine my 2 worlds, right? My professional and my personal life. And the last 8 years now in Catholic education has been really great for me to realize I can now merge all of these values that I've been able to identify throughout my journey and kind of funnel them into one outlet. Mm-hmm. That ironically has now led to the superintendent position. So the assistant superintendent position. So it's for me, the reflection and kind of looking at what my interests are and how life is kind of allowing me to explore them has really kind of guided me to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. And so you just see Eric's taken a very non-traditional route where he's found a lot of success moving up, having a bigger and bigger impact. And Eric and I didn't rehearse his answer. I had no idea. I had never heard that story before. But as you can see, Eric can effortlessly tell stories that help him understand his reflection. So for you all, I want you to think, what is the story? How easy or hard is it for me to tell a story about why I'm an educator? Think about your students and those students who want to go to Harvard, to Dartmouth, to Columbia. Why do they want to go there? What's the underlying reason? When you say, why do you want to go to that college? What is the story that they can provide about why they want to go there? So when we ask ourselves these big questions, it turns out the story you choose to tell determines how purposeful your role will feel to you. So if you're in a role right now and I say, why are you in this role? And you can tell a story like Eric's that has this beginning, middle, and end. It connects the past, the present to the future. That role is going to feel coherent to you. It's going to feel like it's part of a larger life narrative. That's going to lead to a sense of purpose in what you're doing. Now, for some of you, you might be struggling with your story. You might be sitting here saying, I don't know how to answer that question. Or if I was to go and ask my students or a parent who's really, really obsessed with a student getting into Harvard, why do you want them to go to Harvard? They might struggle to actually answer that question in an authentic way. And so don't worry, we can deal with that. And one, from a bigger picture standpoint, this idea of these reflecting on these big questions in life, there's only one time we officially do it in high school, and we know it's going to happen in every single high school. And that's when we're asking students to write the college essay, right? And so we're at a place right now where when the more space we give students to do this type of reflection, the more likely they are to find purpose, the more likely they are to be thriving in their lives. And the good news is that purpose is a practice. It's something that can be intentionally cultivated. It's not something that you are born with. Actually, every single one of us is born with a sense of purpose. So it's there already. And it's not like your true love where you have to go out and find it. And until you find this thing that it's missing, it's something that we can intentionally cultivate. And we're going to work on doing that right now. And so here is the practice, practicing purpose. It involves 3 steps. And these are 3 things you can do, your educators can do, students can do, parents can do. And it's pretty simple. It's dreaming big and it's envisioning the future. It's actually creating space to really get intentional about thinking about the future. How do I want to be remembered? What impact do I want to make? How do I want to grow as a person? It's really creating space to envision that future. In the research, this is called prospection. And it's pretty simple. The more we ask people to think about their future, the more pro-social they think and they get. Meaning the more we think about the future, the more likely we are to want to help other people and to actually help other people. So that's the first step. The second step, though, is to look back and reflect on the past. And so if you ask your students or your educators or yourself, what impact do I want to make as an educator? You're thinking about the future. But you have to look back and reflect on what are the lived experiences in my life that have informed my future aspirations? Who are the people, the experiences, the moments in my life that have informed that motivation about why I want to dream big? You have to take time to look back on the past, to investigate your own internal motivations, to understand, to make sure that you are grounded, your aspirations are coming from the right place. And then you have to act with intention in the present. You have to feel like I have this future goal. I know how it's connected to my past. How can I intentionally act right now in a way that connects these? And the research shows, as we're going to see, the more connected you feel to this, the more likely you are to have a purpose. So let's practice purpose right now. Let's actually just give you a minute to do this. Again, I'm going to ask you a question. And I want you just to spend some time to think about it. You can write it down. You can just take a minute to think, but I really want you to actually think about it. By the way, purpose, the people who are willing to actually do this, even though it feels uncomfortable, that's the difference between people who have a sense of purpose and those who do not. But so we're going to envision your future right now in a very, very short way. And so this is the question I want to ask you is, what do you want to stand for as a person? What do you want to stand for as a professional? What do you want to stand for as a person, as a parent? What do you want to stand for? Now, don't overthink it. And if something comes immediately to mind, write it down. Is it a phrase? Is it a term? Is it one word? Write it down, because that's your internal intuition telling you something about your purpose. But we're going to make it a little easier for you. We all want to stand for our core values. And so there's this researcher, Shalom Schwartz, who's done work on global universal values. And he's gone to 70 different cultures, speaking 53 different languages, asking them about what do you want to stand for as a community? And he's found that there are universal core values that every single community on earth that he has studied has agreed that these are all important. So I want you to take a minute right now to pick 2 to 3 of these core values that you feel like you want to stand for. And as we do this, I want to put Eric on the spot. So Eric, for you as a leader, like what are the core values that you feel are most important for you?
So for me, in my role, I wrote down compassion, service, and independence. And I can get into it more, Tim, if you want, about how that.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
So for me, like, that's just always been something that I find important from my upbringing, right? To be understanding, to be compassionate for other people. That then leads to service, right? Helping others the best you can. And this sense of independence of being able to kind of be free in how you do that, and being able to do it so you don't have to necessarily rely on others, but that you're still there for others. Looking back, just maybe to jump ahead, Tim, like looking back as to how those have shaped my entire life, for me, it helps me understand my current position and why I'm here and how I can do this job better. When I look back to see how those values kind of have influenced my story, kind of have led me down those different roads that I was talking about before, and how I want to continue to grow in those values as a person, as a principal, as an assistant superintendent, as a father, as a friend, and that's kind of been my internal dialogue my entire life without really ever realizing it, that I've been kind of thinking of these things that guide me, I guess, those guiding.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I'm also loving people are putting like their values affirmation statements, these purpose statements in here that are amazing. I highly recommend more people to do that if you feel empowered to do so, because that just writing that down, sharing it with the world is that catalyzes it. Eric, thank you for that. So we said, how do you want to stand for as a person? We're getting you to think about the future. And so thinking about the future is great, but also it gets us to think about how connected do we feel to that future self? And so we can ask students to dream big about the future all the time, but if they don't feel connected to that future self, it can be really, really problematic. So you can see here in the research, they just ask people, how literally connected do you feel to your future self? And it turns out that depending on how close we feel to our future self, different things happen. So when we feel connected to our future selves, meaning when we think about our aspirational best self, it feels like in grasp of who we are now. We practice long-term decision-making, we delay rewards, we eat healthier, act more ethically, spend less and save more. When students feel connected to their future selves, they do more schoolwork, study more often, actively engage in career planning, follow health and safety guidelines more. And the reason this is often when we think about our future selves from a neuropsychological standpoint, we actually view our future selves more like strangers than we do ourselves. We actually don't really think we are going to become that person. And so oftentimes you can ask a student, and you've all had students be like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And they say, I want to play in the Premier League, or I want to play in the NBA, or I want to go to Harvard. And these students aren't even on the football team or the soccer team or doing any of their homework. They're just saying a future aspiration that feels completely disconnected to who they are now. And so they're not doing any of the things that they need to. So what I want to do now to get more connected to the future is to reflect on the past. And I just want to give you a quick little framework on how to think about where your core values come from. So core values are defined by what we choose not to value. Like, you actually know what you really value by what you choose to intentionally not value. And so here's a way to think about your values. There's the spectrum of individualistic versus collectivistic core values. On one side, individualistic means when I win, we win, meaning the better I do, the better my community is going to do. So I'm going to put my needs before the community. I'm going to do what I want to do, because I know the better I do, the better my community is going to do. So this is really about freedom, individuality, independence, doing what you want to do, versus collectivism is when we win, I win. The better my community does, the better I am going to do. So I am going to put the needs of my community before my own. And so that is a collectivist values. And you're going to see here, we're all somewhere on this spectrum. And depending on where you are, it's going to change your values. The other end of the spectrum we have is around stability and growth. And really what this means is, if you're growth oriented, you tend to see change as an opportunity to make things better. I'm embracing change. I want to change things. Versus stability, change tends to be a threat to make things worse. So I'm going to resist change because I value stability over growth. And what we found that I'm going to go over quickly, but you can see in our work, is that depending on where you are on these spectrums, it determines which of your values are most important to you. So if you're individualistic, independence is going to be really, really important. And here it's going to depend on which core values are more important to you. And these turn into these 4 archetypes we call the trailblazer, the builder, the champion, and the guardian. And so trailblazers are people who go their own way, do their own thing. They like working outside of individual organizations. Builders are people who are embracing change, but they're trying to change the organizations that they're in so that they are more equitable, that they're better serving everyone within that organization. So builders push for change out of a sense of justice and compassion for other people who aren't served. Champions tend to be people who are all about individual competition. They love tried and true rules stability because they're really out for individual achievement. And then guardians are those people who love community. They love tradition. These are the people who love keeping things. They like to preserve what's tried and true. And so they resist change because they don't want to lose the culture. They want to conserve the culture of where they are. So I want you to be thinking about which of these archetypes best reflects you. And then what I want you to be thinking about, at your best, are you a trailblazer, builder, champion, or guardian? Like which one really speaks to you? What's a story from your past that explains why this archetype matters to you, right? So why are you a trailblazer, builder, champion, or guardian? And what archetype are you playing now in your role? Because sometimes we get to be in a role where we have our value archetype and then we get a leadership position and we need to adopt different values. If I'm a trailblazer and I'm going off and doing my own thing and I'm innovating, but then I step into a leadership position, suddenly I have to shift into more guardian role. I have to protect and preserve what's tried and true. And so it's just getting yourself to think about, what are my values? Where do they come from? And how am I telling myself stories?
Tim, you mind if I jump in real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing too, as educators, it's not always just on you too. So I think like this was mind blowing for me to think of how other people I'm surrounded by as archetypes impact me in my role. So other teachers in my building, students in my classroom, like how their archetypes are based on their values. And, you have that one student who just likes to drive you crazy. You can't expect him to just change his behavior if it's rooted in such a deep place. So understanding other people's archetypes and then finding roles that fit their values. So for example, a teacher who is a guardian who hates change. Anytime you come up with a new thing, they're the first ones to have the complaint about it. Finding a role within that school that's needed, like maybe all the good things that we're doing that we don't necessarily want to change, have them impacting and influencing that, finding those trailblazers to really then push the envelope for the area that needs it. But I think, as we reflect, not just on ourselves, but on those around us and how we can all work together to, again, build that purpose, build that sense of community and build that purpose from a collective standpoint.
Beautiful. I'm going to share one more thing, and then I do want to open this up to Q&A to make sure we have enough time to answer all your questions, to make sure this is as helpful as possible. The last thing I want you to think about doing, so if you're in a role where you're like, I'm not feeling as connected to my core values, or how do I intentionally, I want to stand for these core values. What can I be doing right now? Tiny little things you can be doing right now is what we call these values challenges. And so I've developed a couple values challenges for you right here. And this is a document that we're actually going to be sharing with you after this. So you'll be getting a Google Doc that has these, where you can come up with these challenges to make you feel more connected to your values. So it's just thinking about, and all of these involve, some of them take 30 minutes, some of them take less than 5 minutes, but it's creating some space to do activities that feel aligned with your core values. And if you can have micro moments that you connect to your core values, that's where purpose resides. Purpose is in the little micro moments in life where, like, I'm having this one little conversation with a student, or I'm cleaning up a hallway when no one's looking. Like, if these little moments that align with our core values, that's actually what purpose looks like in action. And so the final thing I want to just leave with you all, and you will be getting this document, so don't worry that you need to screenshot it or anything, but it's thinking about designing a purposeful community by providing a space to dream big. Like, where are people providing space for your educators, your parents, your students to think about the future in an intentional way? Where are you designing space to not looking back, but looking back to actually reflect back? How are you giving them opportunities to reflect on their past, to tell stories from their past, to help people share their past in a way that connects to their future, and then acting in the present? Are you giving them opportunities to really be thinking about how can they intentionally be using their strengths, developing skills, making decisions aligned with their values to start practicing this purpose? And then also design. The hardest part of this, of creating the space, is that it's vulnerable. It's hard to do because you have to open yourself up, and it had to get a little messy. And so that's where you need to design a space of belonging where people feel safe enough to dream big. So how are you designing belonging in community? By creating formative experiences where people are getting to know each other. How are you designing belonging spaces with people, like helping people develop meaningful relationships with one another? And how are you designing practice of purpose belonging individually? We're asking people to individually reflect. Because at the end of the day, if you read our book, 20% of it is research citations. There's over 500 different papers that we cite in there. But really purpose is pretty easy. It's creating space where people feel comfortable to think about their future, to reflect on their past, and try to connect what they're doing today and tomorrow in a way that makes that past and present and future feel connected. And the more micro moments you can do where people get to do that, the more likely that you're going to have an aha and a light bulb moment where someone's purpose becomes apparent to them. So we call this purpose and belonging inclusive education, people who are committed to doing this work. And so if you feel seen here, or if you feel like you've already been doing the work, we'd love to continue the journey with you. And I'm just going to go through that. And I'm just going to leave that up there where there's a form if you're interested in learning more about what we do or think you have things to offer that could help other people, which I'm already seeing here. I'd love to hear from you. But with that being said, I'd love to open it up for Q&A or let Eric, yeah.
Good. Let me jump in here too, Tim and
Yeah.
Eric. Thank you. This is brilliant. It's really helpful and tremendously insightful. I want to encourage our participants today to put questions into the Q&A. You can also put things into the chat. So I want to ask you this. So you talk about designing space. You talk about micro moments. I want to go back to a comment, Tim, you made about students, and in high school, the only opportunity they would have to do this kind of reflecting on their stories when they write their college essays. So what are some other really practical things that, say, secondary students can do? Eric, you might have some insights with elementary students. So not with our adult community, but with students, opportunities for students, is realizing, of course, that particularly with elementary students, they only have a partial story. It's a very new story, right? But what are some things that could be done in a typical elementary school with students?
I mean, for me, I think it's important, even though, like you said, it's a very limited story. I think it's important to practice them talking about it and to thinking about it in that kind of objective, abstract way. We do it at my school through SEL programs, through our religion class, if you're a religious-based school, but also just through those relationships with teachers and training your faculty to know how to, you can take a math lesson and turn it into this kind of teachable moment where the students are going to reflect on their values and their purpose and where they think they're going. I remember I had a teacher where I think it was a social studies class that I was always just putting myself in the picture, and it helped me kind of practice that ability to look longitudinal, like where am I going? Where have I been? What am I doing? So like Tim said, the formative relationships, and that can take place in any way, shape, or form, either structurally through an SEL program or through an advisory program, or just through how the teachers are having those one-to-one conversations in a discipline meeting, or in just a student check-in.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I think a great place to start is just to be a student of your students,
Right.
Meaning get to know them. So what music do they listen to? What video games are they playing? What are they obsessed with? Where are they focusing their time? Get curious about it. So if you have someone who loves playing tennis or some other sport or cricket or whatever they do, get curious. What is it about cricket that they love so much? What is it about tennis that is the thing that they love so much? Like, start getting them. They have these emotional experiences where they know emotionally what they like. Start getting them to think about, like, articulating, what is it about this thing that I like so much? So just asking these questions to them about getting curious. And so here's a great question for the high school educators. Ask a student if you could do anything in the world after high school, knowing you'd be financially secure, so it would work out, you wouldn't have to worry about money, you'd be successful, like it would work out, whatever you pursue, it would work out and you would succeed, and your friends and family community would support you in doing that thing. If you have all of those, of all the external things, what would you do? You could do anything in the world, what would you do? You're going to get a really interesting answer for that, because they've never really thought about it. And then the work is, why? What is interesting about that thing? Why would you want to travel the world? Why would you want to do photography? What is it about these things that you like? And then it's trying to understand, what are the lived experiences that have informed why you care about those things.
I think also too, it's not just students either, but like I incorporate this kind of conversation in this mindset with teacher summatives. Working with my faculty on helping them set goals, like, where do you want to go as a teacher? Where is that coming from? And how are we doing that right now in the present to really influence that? And I find it's very helpful to have those conversations with principals, with teachers, with even parents. Parents come in, they have a complaint or whatever about the way something in the classroom's happening. Having that conversation about, well, how this is going to help your child kind of long term, and helping them shift that mindset of, well, you have to go to this school because that's just what I want, but helping them kind of let the students guide their future, I find very helpful and very insightful once you see it kind of play out.
Mm-hmm. And so we also had a couple questions at the beginning.
Good. You want to, let's grab that one from Patricia Shea. I'm working on creating a service learning curriculum in our high school, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on how this approach could be incorporated.
Yeah. You or me, Eric, I have ideas, but
take it and while I kind of collect mine.
Yeah. So service learning it's great, right? And so it would be starting from a service learning, and it would be just from an open-ended, what problems in the world do you care about? What challenges in the world do you care about? And getting them to think about those challenges, and then getting them to think about the personal relevance of them. So like, why those challenges? How do those challenges or problems in the world feel personally connected to you? You can't just, there has to be some sort of personal connection for us to care about something. So once they start identifying, like, what impact do you want to make in the world? That's how I would actually do it. You ask them that question. What impact do you hope to make in the world in your life? Get them to freeform on that, and then be like, what problems do you want to be solving in the world? That's envisioning the future. Reflecting on the past is, why do you care about these problems? Why is this the impact you want to make? Have you experienced this problem personally? Have you some sort of privilege where you've realized you've had this privilege where you want to pay it forward to someone else? Get them to reflect on the past about, why is this the impact they want to make? And then planning for the present is thinking about, okay, in our community, where is this challenge occurring? Who is being impacted by this problem? And what is a small thing we could be doing right now to help that person who's going through this challenge, or our community is going through this challenge? And then we have the story, right? Because then we could say, we cared about this problem. We addressed this issue because we wanted to make this impact. And then if you do it in that envision the future, reflect on the past, plan for the present, now we have the narrative. Now, instead of just picking up trash on a random Saturday that doesn't feel that meaningful because, oh, I had to do it, now we have a story that you and your students can tell. you weren't just picking up trash. You were doing a small gesture of trying to become that person who makes that impact that you want to be making.
I was going to say, however it's structured, you want to make sure that you're instilling transferable skills, right? Instead of just doing it to check off a box, doing something that you're teaching that child how to have empathy, on how to then take these reflective skills that they can then use later, and maybe even bigger problems than just in a local community. But I think, yeah, Tim, you nailed it with that too.
Good. We have another question here from Shatila Rosa. And so planning to have a responsive classroom, is it a right way? Not exactly sure what's meant there, though we have already personal, social, and physical education curriculum in place. So, and possibly the intent of the question, I think one of the things as educators, we've all become very cautious over the years of another initiative, another program. Why is this is this another program? Is it an initiative? How does it embed itself into the life and culture of the school?
I can talk a little
without
bit.
being one more thing that
Right.
we need to be attentive to.
Well, right. And I think that's the problem with programs or anything. Like it's only as good as the people delivering it. So with any program, with any SEL program, any, classroom management, it has to start with the people. You have to start with the mindset of that climate and of that community. So if your faculty is all over the place in terms of, do they support, this kind of system or this idea, like you have to start there and build up why this is important, create that sense of purpose that this underlying goal is now our purpose, and we need to all work together to deliver it. You start with that, then now there's buy-in. Now that even if the program's not being delivered as perfectly as it should be, the teachers and the adults in the building still have those kind of those skills to support those kids and to be present for them as needed.
Yeah. And I think Dan's right too. Both of you are right, where it can't just be another thing we're doing, another program, another initiative. It needs to be infused into everyday situations. And the great part about this, it's just language and storytelling. So I think what Shatila was trying to say was culturally responsive, right? How do we do a culturally responsive one? Well, core values make up the norms and the rules in a classroom. So if you know what you value as an educator, you can say, here are the core values that I care about. Here's why I care about, here's a personal story about why I care about these values, and how these values inform the norms and the rules and the culture of this classroom. But then you can say, what do you value? What are the values that you are bringing in here? How is your own context, your own cultural upbringing influence that? Just providing students space to be able to say, this is what I value, and you validating that and saying, yes, that totally makes sense for me. And like, there should be a place in the school for every single different type of value. But in this community, this is what we value in here, but I acknowledge and respect your values as well. Students are going to understand when you are like telling them to do or not do something because of a rule. It's not because you're specifically targeting them. You've already told them it's because, well, these are the core values of the classroom, and they understand your intentions. So you can do this in history class, where you're getting them to reflect on the past and history. You get them to think about the future. So it's really about infusing and integrating these ideas, not building something new. Did you want to add something there, Eric? Or
no, I think you touched on it. Like you want to avoid being like this thing and it's only be done this way, but you can have that filter down to anything, to any class, to any student adult interaction can kind of breathe the idea of what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's two more on here that I see from, I hope I'm saying that.
You know what? So we do have to be mindful of our time. We're gonna wrap up here in about 30 seconds. But what I will do, and first of all, I want to thank you both very, very much. This has been a really enlightening webinar, and appreciate your time and your work that's gone into it. Now, what I want to do is give each of you 15 seconds to put in one last purposeful comment.
Just create space for yourself and others to think about the future, reflect on the past, and plan for the present. And that's what practicing purpose is. It's just creating reflective space.
All right. I was going to say the same thing. Just create time in your schedule to reflect and objectively reflect on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and you know, the picture will develop.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of our participants who joined us for this webinar. I do know that after the webinar, they are put up on YouTube. I think it takes a little bit of time. We can get some more information about that. But again, thank you to both of our presenters today, Tim Klein, Eric Fournette. Great being with you today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.